What's poppin'? It's Maxify back, joined again by my co-host Blake for another episode of Maxify Seminar.
Today we're going to be looking at The Suicide Squad, which is a pretty confusing title because Suicide Squad came out in 2016, and we weren't actually sure what this was. We didn't know if it was a sequel, a prequel. We didn't know if it was just a recut, like how they did with the Justice League.
Yes, and the marketing definitely didn't help because in everything I saw, it was very much, don't worry about it, you'll find out. But, as it turns out, this is a sequel to, I guess, Birds of Prey. It is in the DCEU, and the Suicide Squad again sees a group of supervillains out on a mission for the U.S. government to try to investigate or capture some secret objective. And so, along with being a sequel, it's also kind of a retry at 2016 Suicide Squad with the same kind of story, same kind of idea, but this time doing it kind of right. Because in that original one,
they wanted to be a lot of stuff.
Yes.
And it didn't end up working. Like, they wanted to kind of implement, like, Guardians of the Galaxy.
Yes, they were really trying to mimic Guardians of the Galaxy, and even Deadpool at the time was, there was a big thing with the 2016 Suicide Squad, ended up recutting the movie a little bit to try to match the kind of tone of Deadpool, but here you get that way more naturally because you have that R rating to match that Deadpool-esque humor, and you also have James Gunn, the same director as the Guardians movies, to match that Guardians-style humor, and he works really well. And his Guardians formula is brought into this setting very organically. It works very well in an R-rated setting, and especially his implementation of music was, again, very strong, much better than in that original 2016 movie.
In this movie, James Gunn uses the surroundings to put a lot of stuff in that normally in movies he would just get and you'd be like, okay, but in this movie, for example, there was a flashback scene, and it was in the reflection of a bus window.
Mm-hmm.
And
he uses his surroundings to integrate stuff that would normally maybe pull you out of the movie a little bit. He does it brilliantly with text like I've never seen before. With there's a couple of title cards that are presented in this way, but also there's kind of chapter names throughout the movie that are presented as part of the surrounding, whether it's in like a tree's roots or in blood spilled on a beach. And that was a really creative decision. And I really liked that about this movie. It was one of the highlights for sure of the technical side of this movie, at least.
So in this movie, something they did differently from Suicide Squad is they definitely did their research. The characters in this movie are very obscured, like just abstract characters, unlike the first one where it was pretty much just the classic Suicide Squad.
Definitely, and there were a lot of characters in this film. A lot of characters from diverse backgrounds. A lot of characters I never thought I'd see in motion picture.
For example, Polka Dot Man. Also, King Shark. I didn't expect to see in a Suicide Squad movie.
No, I certainly didn't expect him, and when he was initially announced in premiere marketing stuff, that was a big shock, but it was always a mystery in the marketing who was going to play him, who was going to be the King Shark. I thought it was going to be Taika Waititi, who was announced to be in this movie, but it's not. But the choice that they made for King Shark is perfect. This is maybe the best casting call of the year.
So, they did have a lot of characters, and they were all really well done. The character design was great. I thought all of the outfits, all of the suits were, like, really well done.
Yeah, and they were different too. There were suits that clashed against each other, but it was always for a reason if they did that. But each suit was designed very well, I thought. Then also the choice they made for the main antagonist of the film was another huge shock. Another character I definitely would have never seen coming. It was one that was not shown or hinted at all in the marketing from what I saw. But
Yeah, I was really surprised.
it was actually a really great choice, and one that I really appreciated. Then still on the topic of characters, I thought that Margot Robbie, even among this massive ensemble cast of characters and stars, she stole the show, just like how she did in the original Suicide Squad movie, just like how she did in Birds of Prey. And I think one scene to sum this up was one where she was kind of escaping from imprisonment, much like she did in one scene in Birds of Prey. But it was just an excellent scene, set to just a gigolo.
Yeah, so the choreography in this fight scene is very well done. She uses the surroundings, and it just seems kind of like a real fight.
It was magnificent, just the way it was filmed. Lots of long takes, just intense, high-paced action, and the music choice, again, with Gunn as the director, it can't miss.
So, without really getting into spoilers, at the beginning of this movie, a lot of people die.
And throughout this movie, a lot of the characters die. And that is one thing that this movie really is unique for, is...
It seems like at any point, any of the characters could die, and the story could go on. And they really proved that in the opening scenes.
And doing this really elevates the stakes of the film, because you can't really get attached to the characters as much as you might be able to with a mainstream MCU movie, and it's very much a subversion of that typical MCU thinking of this character's going to be fine, they have a movie slated for next April, they have to live through this movie because they have a film coming up next year. Where
Also,
here, you have basically nothing in the foreground for the DCEU. It is a huge mess. And you have these characters where you very much feel like any of them could die at any time. So the stakes are just a lot higher, and it makes for a much more intense viewing experience.
and also, it never specifically told us when in the future this film is, so, it could be like a year after Birds of Prey, it could be 10 years. So, there's, like, time in between their stuff, movies can come out. So this could easily be the last movie for a certain character.
On that point, this film is very self-contained, which is something, especially with DCU in the past, every single one, and Marvel very much to the same point, every film kind of exists to set up a new property, or set up future stuff, which we've talked about before. I don't feel very good about prioritizing future content over what the present content is, but this movie definitely doesn't do that. Aside from one post-credit scene, this movie exists as its own thing, and that was really refreshing for a superhero movie.
So, like he was saying, it doesn't set up much for sequels and stuff, but that's probably just because it's hard to notice it. It's not big obvious, like, here's this guy that's alive, he's gonna be in the next one. Like, they set up stuff for other movies that, thinking back on it, you're like, okay, that's a bad guy for another thing. It does set up other stuff, but it's done very cleverly. So, let's talk about the special effects and the CGI in this movie. The CGI was very well done.
Outstanding, especially in one scene, a fight scene later in the film, uses reflections, I will say that, and it's incredible. It's seamless, really.
Also,
So much so that you wouldn't even think that it is using visual effects, but it is, and it's so impressive.
yeah. Also, King Shark, like, he is a big shark. It's pretty obvious that it's fake, but it looks real. It's very good CG, and I think that comes because they are doing an animal morph thing no one's ever seen before, so it's easy to do. There's no Uncanny Valley, but still, they did it really good.
So overall, I thought this was maybe the best movie in the DCEU yet, rivaling maybe only Shazam, but I think this one is peak DCEU, and probably the second best movie to come out of DC in the last 10 years.
Yes.
But
I
if
agree.
I had to pick one negative I see about this film is that I'm not exactly certain that it needs to exist. If we take a step like outside of the movie itself, the story, the technical aspects, the idea of this movie being a movie is maybe a little bit troubling because it is an idea that has been done before kind of twice with Suicide Squad and with Birds of Prey in this universe.
And it also doesn't really introduce stuff you need to know. If you didn't see this movie, you would still probably be fine for the next one.
But this it is still pushing forward the DC extended universe, which is very messy. It's still trying to kind of push this forward, push this along. I'm not sure if it needs to do that. Plus, there's not a huge amount of, like, thematic or moral value to the film, which that is certainly uncommon with comic book movies, but with it being just a kind of retreading of 2016 Suicide Squad and being part of this very messy universe where we're not sure if it's setting something up or where the next step is, I do wonder why this movie does exist. A little bit. So we both really enjoyed this. One of the best DC movies of late, and probably the best DCU movie, which I guess that's not saying much, but
yeah, I'm gonna give this a thumbs up, 2 stars.
I'm going to give this an almost thumbs up, 1.5 stars. So
That's fair.
that's a total of 3.5 stars. The Suicide Squad is playing in theaters, but you can also watch it if you have an HBO Max subscription, so I would encourage anyone interested to go take a chance on this movie. It's definitely a step up from Suicide Squad. Definitely don't try to think that this is going to be like that, because it's much better.
I've been Blake.
I've been Max. This has been Maxify
Maxify
Seminar. And we'll see you in the next one.